All Sam wanted to do was make a phone call, but for some reason he feels like he's being prevented from doing so. Last week Sam tried to explain things, but this week he finds himself in more hot water. I'm your narrator, Chad, and this is episode 14, chapter 18 of No Evil. Let's escape. Sam dialed Case's number and waited anxiously for him to answer. Jamie watched him the whole time with a nervous fixation. He sat down on the chair with the phone pressed firmly to his ear, but it rang 5 times without answer. A voice came on the line asking for a brief message, and Sam made perfect eye contact with Jamie as he left the address. "Damn it, Case," Sam said after hanging up.
Do you have anyone else to call?
No. I'd call a cab and head back home, but...
I can give you a ride. You can show me your apartment.
She said it in a tone that made clear she wasn't sold on his story. Neither of them was going to change position at this point, but Jamie seemed happy to move past the conversation and forget it. She left the closet office and went back to the kitchen for a refill of coffee. Sam followed close by and they sat at a table across from one another.
Are you hungry, Sam?
The shelter in the cafeteria had filled substantially. Nearly every cot was full, and the clink of cutlery was constant in the room. Sam watched through a red filter as volunteers dished out plates of scrambled eggs with a couple slices of bacon and some white toast. Sam's stomach rumbled audibly.
Sam?
Actually, yeah. Jamie got up from the table, got a plate of food for Sam and a fork, and sat back down. She sat the plate in front of him and the fork off to the side. It was slightly closer to her, and she did it without speaking. Sam grabbed for the fork without thinking, caught himself, and then fumbled it accidentally on purpose. Jamie put the fork in his hand. Sam took a big bite of scrambled egg.
Sorry. Are they good?
The eggs were actually pretty good. They were moist and not overdone. The toast was slathered in butter, and Sam scooped egg inside of it and took another big bite. "Great," he said. So, how'd you get involved with the shelter?
I did some volunteer work here when I was in high school. I went away to university and studied art history. But I really missed helping people. Eventually, I moved back and became a social worker.
That's a big change.
Yeah, a lot of people say that, but I loved it. It just feels like you're actually making a difference. Well, I love this place anyway. Out of college, I got a job with social services. I used to deal with a lot of abuse cases. I just couldn't handle it. So I work part-time here with Tim now.
Must have been tough.
Yeah, it was. What about you? Have you always been a pickle man?
No, not really. At one point, I was on my way toward being an environmental technologist. I was doing pretty well, too. He finished the plate of eggs ravenously. He munched a final piece of bread with a slice of bacon, then pushed the plate aside. Jamie had got up already, took the plate to some volunteers who were washing dishes, and came back to Sam with a bottle of water.
Would you like a water?
Yes, thank you. I guess I haven't eaten in a while.
So what happened with the technologist thingy?
Jamie asked. Her elbows were on the table with her chin resting in both palms. She looked like a child during story time. Basically, I ran out of money and I couldn't finish. I couldn't get any financial assistance. I had no credit for a loan, so I had to take a job that paid. I tried to do both for a while, but it just didn't work.
Didn't you have any family that could help you out or anything?
I had Case. His dad offered to pay for me, but nah. I'd made my decision by that point. My parents kicked me out when I was 18. I managed to save a little money between benders to pay for most of the classes. It was actually my car that did me in, now that I think about it.
Your car?
Yeah. The engine blew up. There went all my tuition money. I needed the car to get to the job to pay for the classes. I guess I could have worked around it. We'll never know now.
Sounds like you regret it now.
I suppose I do. On some days, anyway. There was no response for a long time. Jamie picked up on Sam's silence, and she winced and turned away from him. It was hard to tell through the red vision, but he thought her face looked flush.
Sorry, that's not really any of my business. I'm just the curious type, I suppose.
No, it's fine. The awkward moment was cut short by a crashing sound at the front of the shelter. Jamie stood immediately and looked toward the door. The clinking cutlery stopped. Footsteps running through the building echoed bluntly through the quiet. They got closer and closer until they could see him at the door. It was Tim. Jamie's body sagged with relief when Tim entered. He looked sweaty and slightly disheveled. His usually crisp shirt was undocked from his cotton dockers. He stopped in the doorframe, doubled over, and drew in great gasps of air. He never took his eyes off of Sam. "Get away from her." What?" Sam said. "I said get away from her. I knew there was something off about you."
What's going on, Tim?
Jamie said. She took a step back from the table where Sam was still sitting. Her eyes darted back and forth between the two men. "The police have been looking for him since last night. Not only that, he's suspected of killing 2 cops, Tim said as he chuffed through breaths.
Sam?
Jamie said, shocked. "I don't know what you're talking about, I swear to you. You shut up. I heard the news on the radio, don't lie." Beads of sweat were dripping from his forehead and onto the floor. "I called the police, they're on their way, so don't move." Sam lifted his hands in the air and remained sitting. He refused to believe it was real and hoped he'd wake from the nightmare. He thought of Case. If Case were here, he could convince them. I'm no murderer. Tim wiped his brow with one hand while urging Jamie to join him in the doorway with the other. He seemed to calm a bit as she came toward him. Sam felt caged. During breakfast, he watched the sunrise and framed billowy clouds as they moved past. The windows seemed smaller now, and for the first time he noticed bars on them. The doors to the cafeteria were thick with small portholes on them, as if they'd been salvaged from a shipwreck. Tim pushed Jamie out of the cafeteria, then he motioned for everyone else to leave. Sam didn't move. He couldn't have killed anyone. He remembered the 2 cops. They seemed to conform to the prototypical good cop, bad cop routine. The man had a grating, gravelly voice. The woman was more pleasant. He remembered speaking with them. Then they left. Suddenly everything was blurry. He could hear Jamie's muffled plea for Tim to wait. He could hear sirens. If I could just see Case, he could put this right. Case knows who I am. I couldn't have done this. Case. Sam heard country music and the rev of an engine. When Andre woke the next morning, it was to the sound of clinking glass. The libations were long ago consumed and the party was over. Jen was sweeping broken glass off the floor beside the bed. He sat up and she gave him a waning smile. "How'd you sleep?" she said as she continued to sweep. "Pretty good. You?" "I didn't." If she had lost sleep, Andre didn't see it. She looked more beautiful than ever wearing just her underwear and a too big t-shirt. Her hair was down and flowed in waves over her shoulders. He couldn't take his eyes off of her, but she seemed to be avoiding looking at him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said as she turned around with a dustpan filled with glass. "I just hope I didn't embarrass myself last night." "Not at all. Why would you say that?" "I don't know. I don't drink much." She walked out of the room and Andre could hear the sound of glass falling into the trash bag. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and pulled on his pants and buttoned his shirt. Then he walked carefully, avoiding any stray shards, out into the kitchen. Jen was sitting at the kitchen island and already sipping coffee. She raised her glass and pointed to the coffee maker on the counter. "There's lots more if you want some," she said. "Yeah, that would be great. My head is... Did you ever see Alien?" "Yeah. Here." She handed him a bottle of aspirin and he shook 2 out. She handed him a glass and he filled it from the tap, swallowed both pills at once, and sat it back in the sink. When he turned back, she was scrolling through her phone. She was frustrated and tossed the phone hard on the counter. The sound rang hollowly through the silent apartment. "I never heard back from Diane about Munson. She's usually pretty upfront if she doesn't want to talk about something," Jan said. "Well, maybe she's just busy." "Maybe." "So, what's the plan for today?" "Today is Saturday, so I guess you can go home and do whatever you want." "Oh, yeah. I didn't realize it was Saturday." Andre closed the undone belt looped around his waist and started toward the front door. He began to lace up his shoes. "I'm just a little out of practice with this stuff." The conversation she didn't want to have was interrupted by the braying of her phone. She looked at the number, then answered it without hesitation. She seemed to go from morose to bubbly without missing a beat. Andre assumed she didn't want the person on the other end of the line to worry. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" Andre could only hear one side of the conversation, but he could tell it was worse than bad news. It was crippling. Jan's mouth hung open as she listened with a stunned look on her face that Andre hoped he'd never have to see again. He knew that look. Someone had died. "How did it happen?" "Oh my God. Yeah, I know. I love you too. I'll call you later." She hung up and didn't take her eyes off the phone for several long seconds. Andre was still hunched with the laces of his shoe in his hands. He finally stood and cleared his throat. Jan seemed to have forgotten Andre was there at all and jumped at the sound. You okay? Andre asked, despite knowing for certain she wasn't. That was my dad. He said he saw on the news that Diana's dead. Andre kicked off the one undone shoe and went to Jan's side. She stood and hugged him tightly. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder and rubbed her back. The pit of worry in his stomach returned, and he could feel beads of sweat forming on his forehead and around his neck. How did it happen? Munson. They're saying Munson did it. They're saying he killed Diane and her partner. They're looking for him now. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I should do. She pulled back from Andre and walked to the couch. She plopped down and reached for the remote. The TV came on with a burst of sound, and she clicked repeatedly at the remote until the sound was bearable. Please stay, Jan said without looking back to Andre. Yeah, for sure. The news gave few details about the murders outside of what Jan's father was able to relate over the phone. A talking head stood outside the hospital explaining that police were still looking for Munson, but there's been no sign of him. Police, apparently, were calling the murders gruesome. The reporter warned residents not to approach Munson and to contact police immediately if spotted. Andre went to the bedroom and grabbed Jan's laptop. He sat beside her on the couch and she rested her head on his shoulder. Andre typed a few words into the search bar and quickly found dozens of articles relating to Munson. Looks like the cat is out of the bag as far as the eyes story goes. Sorry, Jan. It doesn't matter. I just hope they find this guy. Yeah. How does a blind guy murder 2 cops in a hospital and then disappear without a trace? It doesn't make sense. Andre searched his mind for an explanation. All he got were a series of improbable escape scenarios he picked up from movies. He didn't really think it was likely Munson smuggled himself out of the hospital through the laundry chute. Can you find anything about how they were killed? Maybe that's something you don't want to know. I have to know. That's all for episode 14, chapter 18 of No Evil. If you're enjoying the podcast, let us know what you think in the comments. Give us a like, a share, a discount mole hair. Do all the social media things. Become an escapist by subscribing and clicking the bell. And you know what else you could do? You could put on orthopedic shoes and thick glasses and ask everyone you meet if they want to see a picture of your loved one, and when you finally get someone to look, you pull out your official AV Escapes decoder ring and zing 'em! Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next escape.